Today is October 16th, and we're having Martin Armstrong with us to talk about the conflicts in the world. Welcome back, Martin.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Let's get started with what's going on right now in the Middle East. How do you find the situation considering the new escalations between Iran and Israel?
Well, you have to understand that there are definitely what we call neocons in the United States who are very pro war. Um, and, look, they threaten China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran all at the same time. It's quite, you know, I don't know, quite stupid, really. But I think to a large degree, they're hoping to draw Russia in to further weaken it. They've been using Ukraine kind of like Iran uses Hezbollah. It's that's what Ukraine is. They don't care about the Ukrainian people in the slightest. Um, but in the Middle East, there's been a lot of debate going back and forth. What are you going to retaliate with? The you essentially have three main targets. The proportional one would be attacking their military production of missiles, etc. That would be proportionate. Then you have the possibility of attacking their energy production. Now, there I can tell you that the Biden administration is saying, no, don't touch that. Because what would happen is that oil prices would start rising dramatically, and he doesn't want to see inflation, before the election. And then your third possible target is the nuclear facilities, but they're deeply dug in, and Israel does not have the ability to really do bunker type attacks. U.S. has bombs for that. They were using them in Afghanistan, and so the likelihood of Israel being able to actually destroy the nuclear facilities of Iran is probably not very high. So it's really been, what are they going to attack? And you have the Biden administration, at least before the election, saying, don't touch the oil. So it really depends when it comes. If it comes after the election, then the oil will probably be on the table. Otherwise, before the election in the U.S., you're most likely looking at a proportional response, going after the military facilities that make drones and missiles, etc. But I mean, Israel is kind of in a tough place in a way. The Biden has even come out threatening to cut off aid, etc., to them, unless they, expand in humanitarian things in Gaza. But it's so you have a lot of protests in the various universities in favor of the Palestinians, and then in Washington. You have an awful lot of Jewish people in the Congress, so it flips the other way. So it's a much more dangerous situation, mainly because a lot of people see this as biblical, so to speak. You have people, actually cheering on maybe the second coming of Christ, etc. It's and you have it on both sides. You have evangelicals over here kind of wishing for that, And in Judaism, you have others, looking at the same thing in the returning of the Messiah. And in Islam, they also talk about the same sort of scenarios. So it's you do definitely have a number of religious factors in here, kind of cheering it on, and that gives a lot more concern to the Middle East war compared to, for example, Ukraine or Taiwan. Um, so it's definitely, the Middle East is much more perhaps politically serious as far as its wider spread situation. In Europe, you have a lot of Muslims that have entered Europe, burning churches or things of that nature. In the Middle East, you have most of the Arab countries more or less supporting Russia. So it's really quite a mixed bag.
And when you look at Israel right now, they're fighting right in Gaza, in the West Bank, right now in the southern part of Lebanon, against Houthis in Yemen, and they're attacking some targets in Syria, and with Iraqis, and right now with Iranians. They call it seven front war, as Netanyahu calls it. Do you think that with the current situation of their economy, how do you find it? Many people are believing that with their economy, with the current state of their economy, is not sustainable for them, and without the help from the United States, they're gonna collapse. What's your take? How do you find it right now?
I think what you're really looking at is more of a global war, probably next year. And because you have, at the same time, look, you have Ukraine that stupidly invaded Russia. And what they're desperately trying to do is to get Putin to attack anything in NATO so they can call him the aggressor. All right. You then have in the United States, you have Trump and RFK, both against war. I've even spoken with RFK. All right. So, I know this is not, speculation or BS. I was at Mar-a-Lago in March of 2020 when went there for dinner. And Trump actually said, that's when he said he wanted to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. But it was the reason. He said that he was tired of writing letters to parents that your son died in war. And he said, for what? They've been fighting over borders there for 1,000 years. What difference are we going to make? So that is very anti-typical politician. Like you have John Bolton, I think he would invade Canada to get to Russians, So you clearly have a group of people that are very, very pro-war. And every country has this. Putin is not the warmonger. He is probably the only adult in the room, but they demonize him just like they did Saddam Hussein, etc. That's a psychological war tactic. All right. Inside Russia, his critics are saying he should have invaded Ukraine like U.S. did to Iraq, and it would have been over in 6 weeks. But you have to understand, Putin is more of a historian to some degree, and basically Kiev is where the Russians began. All right, so he did not want to invade Ukraine. That's why I called it a special operation, just to protect the Donbass. To him, attacking Kiev and bombing it out of existence would be like the United States doing that to London. All right, it's from a cultural perspective. However, the hardliners behind Putin, they could care less. All right, so we have to be mindful that if you really did remove Putin, it's going to get much worse, not better. And it's kind of like, the art of war. You better understand your enemy. If you don't, you're going to lose every battle, and this is why you see most of the people behind Putin making these threats to nuclear war, etc. Putin has even called for a meeting of the 5 nuclear powers in the UN. They don't want to go because he says, do you really want to go in this direction? He's trying to talk everybody down. Zelensky is just a puppet. That's it. He's not some hero. He doesn't deserve it. 2 seconds of a thought. I know a lot of Ukrainians, they see him as a traitor to their country. There was a peace deal. It was about to be signed with Putin. And Boris Johnson hopped on the plane, flew over and said, no, you're not allowed to. So from the Ukrainian perspective, why they see him as a traitor is that they feel that they can't even, they're not in charge of their own country unless, the West says do this or do that. And that's why actually on May 7th, there was an attempt to assassinate Zelensky. The same as like against Hitler. All right. And the 2 colonels were caught. And he ended up firing his chief of bodyguards. Who is protecting him? Guess what? It's Americans. He doesn't trust his own people because they look at him as a traitor, the same way as a lot of them tried to assassinate Hitler. That if they took Zelensky out, they would get their own country back. Like, what are they fighting for? They had, the Donbass, most people don't know much about it at all. I mean, that's where Khrushchev grew up. He was in charge of rebuilding Kiev after World War II. His successor, all right, Brezhnev, was born in the Donbass. Oh, but this is not Russia? It's Ukrainian territory. It's a grab for territory. That's it. Everybody that's there is really, they're Russians. They've been there for hundreds of years. Zelensky says outlaws speaking Russian as an official language, and then outlaws their religion. Says you can no longer follow Moscow and Christian Orthodox. You have to. Christmas will now be December 25th. I mean, even the Pope came out against Zelensky. So you cannot force, abandon people's religions. You can't do that. Do you go into Iraq and say everybody has to give up Islam and adopt Christianity? Come on. You don't do these sorts of things. So unfortunately, you have these neocons that all I can say is I think they are psychologically damaged from the 50s, that when we all had to, hide under our desks in air raid drills and stuff like that. And you had the McCarthy era of hunting Red Scares and communists, and everybody's communist behind, every pillar. And so when communism fell, I mean, I could tell you I was down in Washington. And when communism fell and Gorbachev made his speech, you had Ronald Reagan wanted to basically go meet with him. And the neocons, I can tell you personally, they said, Okay, fine. He's no longer a communist. You can never trust a Russian. So it just changed from communism to racism or something. But unfortunately, these people have seized control. Blinken's really running the White House. Obama is maybe interfering a lot, and so is Hillary. But Biden's not running the country, and neither is Camilla. And let's get real here. She's just another placeholder like he is. What she did at the Munich Security Conference was an example of that. She just handed a card. Oh, Ukraine should join NATO. Oh, that sounds good. All right, you just wiped out, 2 treaties. And then 2 days later, Putin moves in. You sign treaties against this stuff. And then there was the Minsk agreement. And you had Angela Merkel stand up and actually said that we never, negotiated that in good faith. We were just buying Ukraine time to build an army. Why would you then negotiate with anybody if they sign agreements, but they don't really mean it? This is the state of affairs that we are in. The whole world is completely crazy. Nobody talks about peace. I was recently in Europe, spoke to 3 governments, and nobody's interested in peace. Everybody wants war. I was in Italy, and I said, well, I'm glad I'm here to see the Colosseum for the last time. It's probably not going to be standing. Oh, how could you say that? I said, because, Hitler was actually respectful of monuments, and he didn't bomb Paris because he thought it was a pretty city. But back then, you could just target a building. Today, they lob one in here, it takes out the whole city. All right, we're talking about a different ball game here. You attack London, and Big Ben's not going to be there for a tourist, when this is all over. So I don't really understand why these people are just completely going bonkers. Much of it, I believe, is because they know they have a debt crisis. And I've been warning them that how this is going to end. It's not going to look pretty. History shows. They're in a Ponzi scheme. So every year they issue new debt to pay off the old. And you can keep that going as long as somebody's willing to buy. So it's not the debt to GDP, or it could be, 50 quadrillion. It doesn't matter. As long as people are willing to buy, you can keep the thing, basically going. It's like a hamster in a wheel. Just keep running until when nobody's there to buy it, that's when the default comes. History is an example. It just shows us this is how it's always been. So what I am concerned about is they do know that day is coming. And, all this nonsense, we're fighting for democracy and freedom. On Face the Nation, you had Lindsey Graham, who's one of the number one neocons. He slipped, and for the first time, he actually said the truth. He said there was $10 to $12 trillion of natural resources under Crimea. It's a gas field. And he said, we can't allow Russia and China to get that. So what happened to democracy? Suddenly it's about money again. They never tell the truth about anything. Every single war they have just lied. Like Iraq, weapons of mass destruction. We thought they were there, It's just nonsense all the time. But these people who always want war seem to be gravitated and attracted uh, like a mosquito to a bug light. They want the power. They want to change the world and their vision, whatever it is. And unfortunately, so look, why do we have the BRICS developing? Because you put sanctions on Russia. And that was very stupid because it was a warning to everybody else. If you don't do as we tell you to do, we're going to put sanctions on you. So all of a sudden you have China separating, it's creating its own monetary, system and clearing system. And you have India, even Turkey's talking about joining BRICS. Because back in 2014, when Russia went into Crimea, Obama went to the SWIFT system and said, we want you to remove them from SWIFT. And they refused. They said, you're not going to turn this into a weapon. So what happened? They replaced the head of SWIFT in 2019. This guy, oh, okay, fine, whatever you want, just tell me what to do. And so then they removed, Russia. So now you've divided the world economy. And so now you have the UN pitching that we need this one world government. The IMF has already created their own digital currency. So what they're thinking is that we'll replace the dollar and then bring everybody back together again. And it won't be used for political purposes. So, I mean, we've got so many different people just trying to get their own agendas going. You have NATO, and you can look this up. I mean, they're out there trying to raise $100 billion to circumvent Trump. If Trump and RFK are, come to power, they realize that Trump has already said, and so has RFK, the way to stop the Ukrainian war, cut off the money. So here you have NATO trying to raise $100 billion to make sure the war against Russia continues. NATO is not defending Europe. It's actually, look, I've seen the internal memos and stuff. What has been behind this? NATO was fearing that climate change was sucking up all the money and they were irrelevant. And I even saw things, basically they said, how do we remain relevant to get money? And that is to say Russia wants to invade Europe. Same old story as when they were back, communist. So NATO it must keep, pounding the war drums. Otherwise it doesn't get money. They're all out of work. All right. So you have to look at the self-interests here. The same thing in the United States. You get who's always for the war. It's the guys that get money from the military industrial complex. Here's how many you need, a few more million. Here you go. It's just very corrupt. Our forms of government, unfortunately, republics are the most corrupt form of government historically. Simple as that. You can't bribe a monarch. You can't bribe a dictator, but you can bribe a republic because everybody's up for sale. Particularly when they got to run for election all the time. They need money for every time. It's and people just don't know what's going on. They think, oh, gee, I like what Camilla says versus Trump. You're not voting for what the hell they say. It's the people behind them. All right. Trump, there is a very good documentary just came out about General Flynn. And he was with Trump, was all on board about draining the swamp. And Obama, the one person Obama named and told Trump, do not let him come into your administration, was General Flynn. Why? Because he would start cutting the intelligence community, which he used to run. He knew where all the fat was. It's a very good documentary. It's on Amazon. I suggest watching it, and will give you a real idea of what's behind the curtain. It's much more sinister than you think, and these people that you're just going to vote for Camilla because, I've always been a Democrat. They don't listen to what she says or anything else. You have Republicans that do the same thing. And if you look at the elections, you'll see that really it's typically less than 10% of the people who really decide. It's the independents. Barack Obama, what did he win? I think it was 51.5% or something. It's never a huge majority. Only 3 presidents ever got 60% or more. And that was FDR the first time he was up, not the second or third. Johnson after Kennedy was assassinated. And Richard Nixon when he said he was going to take us out of Vietnam. Other than that, go look at them all. They win by 51, 52, 53%. That's it. And they pretend that they just want a mandate, and it's never a mandate. So it's, you just have a bulk of people on both sides that vote based upon party. They don't care what anybody says. They don't listen. So it's only the intelligent independent that actually makes a decision back and forth. So I just see them. We've got North Korea sending troops over to Ukraine. You can't threaten 4 areas simultaneously. The West will lose. We don't have enough troops between everybody to go, defend against China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran all simultaneously. It's not going to happen. So I fear that these neocons are so afraid of Trump coming in and shutting them down that they're desperate and they're trying everything they can to create some sort of war before he ever gets to power. It's a sad state of affairs, but so you're looking at, I think, the Middle East being much more serious from the perspective of religious ideas of Armageddon, etc., that you hear a lot of people talking about. Russia, basically, I think you're going to see that probably turn into nuclear. The West looks at Russia the same way Hitler and Napoleon did. Russia is the richest country in the world from a natural resource perspective. They've got the gold, the diamonds, the oil, etc. Platinum, rare. In fact, they're the only country that ever issued even platinum coins. And so what you're really looking at there is they think that, like both Hitler and Napoleon, if they conquer Russia, they'll have all this wealth, pay off the debts or whatever. But I don't care how much they get. They would never pay off the debts. They'd always spend more anyhow. But most people do not know that Russia had the largest gold reserves of any country in the world in 1917. Because of the Bolsheviks and the Communist Revolution there, the people there in the treasury took the gold out and they hid it. It's never been found. Rumors are that it was buried in a forest. Others, that was dropped at the bottom of a deep lake. All kinds of rumors. It would probably make like hunting the Knights Templar treasures, But and whoever did it is long gone. So you don't have any eyewitnesses left. It's been something that many people in Russia have sought to try to discover, and nobody's found it yet. But that just gives you an idea that they had the largest gold reserves of any country in the world in 1917. Um, so they just look at Russia as this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah. When you look at the picture right now, we have Russia fighting Ukraine, and we have Russia in the Middle East, in Syria. As we talk, they're bombing two cities in Syria, these radical Islamists, Wahhabis, they're calling. And on the other hand, you see the United States getting involved. As you mentioned, you believe that the neocons are behind the or the mastermind of what's going on in Ukraine. How about the Middle East? Because do you think the same set of people are running the show in the Middle East, or is something else?
Um, Look, you have Netanyahu. Most people don't know, but he went to school by Philadelphia. So that's where Bibi basically grew up. It's the same area where a number of neocons came from. I knew Bill Kristol, his father. He taught there at Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania. His father's the one that started it, the whole neocon movement. So you definitely have those in Israel that also see this as a religious, their time. And I believe Netanyahu's probably in that camp. So is the U.S. solely in charge of Israel? No. As I said, Obama was pushing for it. I think Obama's been much more of a neocon than, and he was the one that proposed going into Syria, and he couldn't get the votes to do so. That was over a pipeline from Qatar to go to Europe to cut off Russia. Even the climate change, you can Google it. Who was the first person to present climate change to the U.S. Congress? Okay, it was John McCain, the father of neocons. Why? If you look at what he was proposing, it had nothing to do with the earth and the climate. It was to introduce nuclear power to Europe to cut off the energy sales from Russia. It's always been about cutting off Russia. Look at after they blew up Nord Stream, they told Germany, look, keep your mouth shut. And U.S. taxpayers started paying for a pipeline from Nigeria to go to Europe. All right. Then there was a coup in Niger. Who hopped on the plane to go over there to try and convince them to allow it to keep going? It was Victoria Nuland, the queen of the neocons. All of these things are connected. The pipeline through Syria, the pipeline from Nigeria, all of these things are to undermine Russia. That's what it's all been about. You can look on YouTube.
And the main goal is China after Russia.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
On YouTube, there is the old neocon that took us into Vietnam, Robert McNamara. Look him up. He basically did an interview before he died, I guess to clear his conscience. And he took us into Vietnam, and he said we were wrong. We thought Russia was there. And he said we were wrong. It was just a civil war. That was the whole Vietnam thing. All again, lies. Johnson said we were never attacked. It was all fictional, made up stuff. And look, I mean, Hitler used false flags to gain power. The Bundestag. So, oh, it was the communists that set it on fire. It was all nonsense. They do this all the time. Weapons of mass destruction. It's for Iraq. I mean, whatever they say, trust me, it's never the truth. Every single war. There was a Senate investigation on Pearl Harbor. FDR did the same thing to Japan that we're doing to Russia today. Froze all their assets, cut off their energy, etc. And when why did Japan attack? Because he said, all right, fine, I'll put an embargo with my ships against you to prevent you from getting energy from any other place. All right. There was a big Senate investigation. Did FDR deliberately create World War II? In the Pacific to get us into war because Congress kept denying him a declaration of war for Europe. So it came out that the U.S. had already broken the code for Japan. They knew when it was coming. There was even the Honolulu Tribune the day before said we're going to be attacked. There was a leak. And then the Senate investigation was to see, did FDR deliberately create this? And they said, well, we're not sure entirely he really knew. That was just another cover-up. But so I'm just telling you that there is never a war that where I think it was Winston Churchill said the first victim in war is always the truth, and it needs a bodyguard surrounded by lies. So it's we have to be realistic here. Israel has its own agenda, and it is going to press it. And they're counting on basically the U.S. not cutting the ties. Although Biden came out and said, well, if you don't get more, with Gaza and humanitarian, we're going to cut off aid. I seriously doubt Congress would allow that to happen. But, that's basically for show because there's so much anti-Semitism really taking place right now because of the war with Gaza, etc. So that they need to deflect it to some degree, but is it true? Probably not. Look, I the Middle East is definitely the key piece as far as stirring up the religious elements and creating a holy war on both sides. Russia is basically about conquest. They want to conquer. I look. You even had, the minister of Estonia come out and say that, Russia's too big and it should be broken up. Very nice. Well, if Russia said, well, the United States is too big and it should be broken back up to 50 states. What would the press say about, that's horrible, But we can say that against Russia. Russia is it's the last great empire. All the others have fallen. This is the last one to go down. And that is the objective. It is to conquer basically Russia. If you look back at Henry Kissinger and Nixon, they understood, to bring peace, they had to separate China from Russia. These, clowns have pushed everybody together. You have to wonder, what are these neocons just driven by their own personal hatred? I find it extremely distressing that you have um, three people in the Biden administration. Um, I mean, I have a lot of Jewish friends. Oh, I know, but you have Garland, you have Blinken, and you had Victoria Nuland. All three claim to have been, their families were there in Ukraine and persecuted by the Russians. I mean, there's plenty of Jews around. I mean, not everybody's from that one place. How could three of them possibly end up in the same administration together? Something's just not right. And then Garland goes after Trump to try and stop him from winning anything. Blinken's basically waging World War III on everybody. And Victoria Nuland was with him. I mean, like I said, she ran down to Niger to try and get the pipeline continuing to go. I just find it a conflict of interest that you would have three people in there who all claim that their families were persecuted by the Russians. That's not right. It should not be anywhere close to making decisions on foreign policy. It's just, it shouldn't be there.
Yeah. And right now, Donald Trump says that he will put 100% tariffs on countries abandoning the US dollar as the world reserve currency. How, in your opinion, with this situation, with what we're witnessing right now, we have a new summit in Kazan in this month in Russia, the new BRICS summit. Do you think that is the United States capable of putting tremendous pressure on BRICS to abandon, to not abandon the US dollar? Because the way that we're witnessing right now with Russia, with China, Iran, even India, that the United States thought before that they can put pressure to separate them from Russia, which wasn't successful, at least for this conflict in Ukraine. What does the United States have in its hand to put pressure on these countries, in your opinion?
Nothing. Those statements coming from Trump, basically, it's old school. What makes the dollar the reserve currency? It's the fact that the United States has the largest consumer, economy. So Japan needs to sell its Toyotas to Americans. Germany needs to sell its BMWs and Mercedes to Americans. This is how they grew from, the ashes after World War II. All right. China, same thing. Russia, same thing. When you start cutting off the trade, all right, putting 100% tariffs on them, it will do nothing. It's not the issue. Why, it's like these states, like California wants to put an exit tax. Oh, let's punish the people for leaving. Does anybody ask why are they leaving? They don't do that. It's let's punish people for doing something we don't like them to do. But you never look at yourself in a mirror to say, why are they leaving? Because what am I doing that's making them want to leave? So in all honesty, if Trump puts 100% tariffs, which I doubt that he would, but, he doesn't understand tariffs. Honestly, he really doesn't. And most people basically do not understand this issue of international trade. They don't get it. They don't understand. They think the dollar is reserve currency because of what? It's the consumer-based economy. Everybody needs to sell something to America. That's it. So then you price it in dollars to be able to sell it. Simple as that. Germany has been the other way around. So This is what you're going to look at.
Yeah. In your opinion, right now, the way that, as you mentioned, Turkey is so interested in joining BRICS right now. In the continent of Europe, we have Serbia, which is not part of the European Union. They're talking about they're giving up on joining the EU. They want to join BRICS. And how do you see? And it seems that in this new summit, they're not going to accept new members in BRICS. Is it going to, in your opinion, is it going to make a huge change on top? Because as we know, they're trying to find a way to just not using the way that Donald Trump was talking about, not using the US dollar in their trades, but with having all these countries together, South Africa, India, China, Russia, Iran, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, UAE, all of them, you have the energy, you have technology, you have natural resources. Do you think, how long does it take for them to get independent from the US dollar?
It really can't. It's fine. You can have all these things you want. You got to sell them to somebody. All right. This is the reason. Look at Germany. Germany is, they're not using that same model. What they're using is the old mercantile model from the 18th century. We build stuff and sell it to somebody else. All right. They have the highest taxes. Google it, you'll see the average, net worth of a German is less than an Italian. They're so afraid of inflation. All right. That's fine. They build everything for everybody else, but they keep their taxes so high that the German citizen can't buy it. All right. So, what you have to look at is China has figured this out. China is trying to build a consumer-based economy. And most of these BRICS don't even understand it. But China is trying to replace the U.S. from that perspective. All right. Eventually it will, yes, because the West is just, it's gone completely bonkers with these neocons have seized power. We wouldn't be in this position of a debt. We're still paying interest on World War II debt. They never pay anything off. Okay. If you subtracted all the neocon wars that they have waged, all right, U.S. debt would be at best 30% of what it is today. It's all war. It's not even going out to help moms and pops and orphans and schools and stuff like that. It's all nonsense. If you really step back and look at it, sometimes, you get interest expenditures, exceeding military. And then who owns the debt? You'll see that almost up to even 70% of the interest, accumulative interest over the years, is what the national debt is. So that went out to everybody else. All right. Nobody looks at this realistically. All right. We're in an ongoing debt crisis. This year, you're looking at the global debt will exceed $100 trillion globally. China, they should have been more authoritarian. They were not. All right. They told their provinces, do not borrow in dollars. They told these real estate companies, do not borrow in dollars. So what happened? They borrowed in dollars because they thought the interest rate was cheap. Then the dollar went up. They lost 20, 30%. It's you have to understand what this really is. And China will surpass the United States. There's no question about that. But they are trying to build a consumer-based economy, not a mercantile one like like Europe has. So you're really looking at it's going to take maybe about another 8 years, but when you get to after that, China will replace the United States as the largest financial capital of the world. It always moves. Move from Babylon to the Greeks, from the Greeks to the Roman. I mean, this is just the way it is. Spain had it, then they lost it to the Dutch lost it to the English lost it to America. I mean, nothing's ever changed. If that statement was wrong, we should all be still speaking Babylonian,
With that change that you've just mentioned, in your opinion, to wrap up this session, will this change bring global peace or trigger disastrous wars, in your opinion?
No, we're heading into war right now, mainly because the economic tensions are there. People are all the old hatreds, one way or another, are all surfacing. You take the Middle East, you've got Iran is Shiite, Saudi Arabia is Sunni. All right. So for even taking Israel out of the question, you still have the same thing, which is kind of almost like the Protestant Reformations in Europe. All right. In Britain, they still call Catholics papes, and that was Civil War was 1649. All right. I mean, I went to Yugoslavia. I was called in by the government there before it all broke up. And I was there and they said, oh, they killed 600 of us and threw us in a common grave. And I thought I missed something in the news. I said, oh, my God, really? I said, gee, when did that happen? They said, oh, about 700 years ago. I said, oh, yes. Okay, that one. I've been in Athens when they were protesting against the Germans dressed up in Nazi uniforms walking down the street. All the old hatreds come up. I mean, I was in Bavaria and it was a holiday. And I said, oh, today's yeah, it's a holiday. I said, what are we celebrating? So winning the war. I said, which war is this? Oh, against Prussia. Prussia was Protestant and Bavaria was Catholic. I mean, it's still a national holiday. So these differences, like in Ukraine, Russian versus Ukrainian. I mean, we had 2 Ukrainian employees, one from Kiev and one from Donetsk. They would never talk to each other. All right. I mean, we had a conference in Athens, and the one from Kiev would not go back the fastest way, which was a connecting flight through Moscow. Wouldn't even do that. No, went off to Spain, and Spain, every which way, double the time they get home, because would not even take a connecting flight through Moscow. If you brought a bottle of Russian vodka to dinner in Kiev, they'd throw it at you. It's an insult. I mean, these things, they're systemic. They're raised into people for generations. So I seriously doubt that you're going to look. I mean, it was a celebration when England, the king abandoned its German ethnic titles. I mean, because they were, their cousins, they were German, George, etc. And they celebrated that, because it was a war. I mean, these things just go on and on and on. They do not change. So you're talking about humanity. All right. The only example that ever worked for world peace was the Roman Empire, the Pax Romana for 1,000. How did they achieve it? They did exactly opposite of Zelensky. All right. Yes, they conquered these different countries. Um, the Christians called them pagans because they had hundreds of gods. No, they didn't. What it was that they conquered, Gaul. Okay. They didn't say you have to honor our gods. You can keep your own. All right. So, yes, there are hundreds of, but it wasn't that they were all Romans, just that they believed in freedom of religion. All right. You kept your culture. So how did a peace happen? Because somebody making a vase in France could sell it to somebody in Syria. Free trade. All right. That's the answer. If we were very close to that. And then this whole nonsense with Russia started. I mean, you want peace, free trade. Then Russian citizen is going to make something, sell it to an American. And if the world leaders don't like it, you're going, hey, I'm going to be out of business if you go to war. I think the longest living veteran from World War One, before he died, he said, look, 45 million people died. We should have just taken the world leaders, thrown them in a room, give them a gun, and let them settle it. They want to send everybody else to war, and what do you get out of it? Nothing. The best you can hope is you come back in one piece. What do you get from it? There is nothing. It's a great sales job. You psychologically demonize your opponent. So they demonized Saddam Hussein. All right. You removed him, and then what'd you get? Sectarian violence, ISIS, and all this, because at least he kept things in check. And you got Tony Blair's apology about that. It's on YouTube. He said, well, we thought we were removing Saddam. We didn't realize we would subject them to sectarian violence. These people never think. All they see is their objective. They never look at what happens afterwards. Never. They don't think forward. They're very myopic in their vision. That's it. Okay, we got to take down Russia. Then what happens? Does anybody have any scenario, speculation? What would happen if they did conquer Russia? Would China then say, oh, okay, fine, we're coming in? I mean, we want some of this. I mean, nobody knows because you don't think that far forward.
It's all delusional, Mark.
It is. It's look, I've studied this. I've had dinner with some of these people. I've looked in their eyes, and you don't even see a warm light. It is. I try to be objective. I look at it from a historical standpoint. How do we always end up in these situations? It's very clear. Human nature never changes. It just doesn't. So that's why history repeats. We keep making the same stupid mistakes over and over and over again. And do we ever learn from them? No. It's like socialism or Marxism. How many times has it been tried? Has it ever worked once? No. All right. Why? Because it's against human nature. It tries to turn everybody into drones. I mean, I went behind the Berlin Wall before it fell. Children were taught that the state was your parent. And if your biological parents ever said anything, turn them in. Because it's the state that's taking care of you.
Thank you so much, Martin, for being with us today. Great pleasure to talk with you.
Well, thank you. Take care over there.
Take care.
And let's see what happens after the election.
Yeah, definitely.